Hey Joe, I'm a freelancer and my income varies quite often month to month. How can I create a flexible budget that accommodates fluctuations? So this is a really good question that a lot of people don't consider when they're creating their budget. If you don't have a fixed income, what you need to do is you need to take the average of the last 3 months income net after you've kind of put away money for taxes. Especially if you're a freelancer or a 1099 employee, you have to factor in that is not your net income, that is your gross income, which means you need to set aside whatever your tax bracket's going to be. Whoever does your taxes, or if you do them online, you can typically see what you paid in taxes the previous year, especially if your income is going to be about the same. And so you need to account for that, number one. So you put that money away in a fund or in a bank account that you don't touch so that you ensure that you have that money at the end of the year when you have to pay taxes. When you have an income that fluctuates, but it stays somewhat the same, or even if it fluctuates quite often, maybe it's seasonal, you have to do these recalculations very frequently. I recommend doing them as early as every month. You have a new calculated income based off averages, and you have to kind of decide that if you're seasonal, then you need to take your last year. If you've been doing the same thing, let's say for a couple years, and you're seasonal, you want to take your last year month's income and base it off of that time, based off that. So let's say you're in January and you're calculating your budget for January. You would look at January the previous year, find out whatever your net income was after your allocated tax amount. Find out what that net is, and then you'll use that as a budget. I always try to go 1 to 3% below that amount in case you make less money. So you can kind of gauge what your budget is, and if you make more money, then great, you have more money to put towards savings in the next month, and so you just have to adjust it. So I adjust that. I try to do every month in the beginning so I can kind of set an average, and then I try to stay below that average as well as possible. And you have to do a lot of adjustments, do monthly adjustments until you kind of can gauge, especially if a lot of your months you have consistent income and you can kind of gauge what your average is, then do it that way. But if your income, especially if you're fresh at this and you just started a freelance job and you don't know what you're going to make, then you have to go at least and do through 1 month and try to budget as well as you can based off the money that you're making every single day minus a reserve for taxes. And then you just gauge it month to month. And then eventually you can gauge it, every quarter, and then maybe every half year, and then every year. What I mean by gauging it is basically taking if you're doing it every quarter, you take the last 3 months of net income, and then you divide it by 3, and you take that amount, take off like 1%, 2%, or 3%, depending on how aggressive you want to get, just for fluctuation. So in case you make less money, and then you'll use that, and that'll be your budget, right? And then you take your discretionary, non-discretionary, your savings, and you do all your budget that way. So I hope that helps. If you're really, really struggling with it, you want to send me a message, I'd be happy to help you one-on-one. Go through it and figure out what works for you and figure out the fluctuation in your income so we can set you up the best budget. You have to start somewhere. Don't make this the biggest issue. You'll be able to find out if you're over budget or under budget in the next month or two if you're just starting out. And you'll get more clarity by doing it that way.